Welcome to Howling with the Wolfe, everybody. Post-draft and Josh Rosen edition, or we have a quarterback edition, whatever you want to call it. We're getting past the heat of the offseason. NFL draft is over, free agency is over, so it's probably a good time to kind of sum up where we are in the NFL season. Rosters at this point will probably be 80-85% of what an NFL team will be in September. There's still going to be some injuries, some free agent signings, some trades, but otherwise, the teams are what they are. So we're here to talk 20, 30 minutes. I'm Cameron Wolfe for ESPN. We have these Howling with the Wolves session chats to hear what you guys want to talk about. And I have a couple topics I want to hit today. Definitely want to discuss the NFL draft. Definitely want to discuss the Josh Rosen trade to the Dolphins that shook up the landscape of the quarterback race a bit. And I want to talk about, the AFC East in particular with the Patriots, the Jets, the Buffalo Bills, and the Dolphins, and what that landscape could look like over the next 5 years. I got a couple of questions before I came on air that I want to answer. But if you have questions, as always, fire them away on that chat on the right hand side of the phone or computer, whatever you're looking at. So, yeah, let's go ahead and hop into it. First, I definitely want to say that this every year you watch the draft, and it's like there's always an out of the ordinary storyline, and this year became the Josh Rosen crusade. Like, what's going on with him? What do you think about him? What exactly is the is he gonna go? Do the Dolphins want him? Are the Cardinals gonna get good value out of him? All this sort of buzz is going on. So to be in the middle of it, to sort of have a team that's in the mix of it is definitely interesting. Am I coming through clearly? One second. I want to see. Is he gonna go? Yeah. Okay. I was looking at the video. It's coming out a little choppy. Let me know if it's choppy on you guys end. Hopefully it's not, but I cannot tell. So, yeah, I guess I want to go ahead and hop into the Josh Rosen trade because um, the Dolphins needed a quarterback more than anybody, and they sat there at the 13th pick, and they had a chance to get Dwayne Haskins, and they decided to pass, and that's going to be the pick that they didn't make. That's going to be traced throughout their next 5-10 years until they find that franchise quarterback guy. Was passing on Dwayne Haskins the right move? And they essentially got what they thought was the best quarterback answer for them in this draft in Josh Rosen. And I'm gonna be honest, I didn't love him out of college. I didn't love him last year. He had one of the worst seasons as a pro. But you've got to look at his situation and know that they had a terrible offensive line. They had an absolutely horrific instability at the coaching staff, where they went through two different offensive coordinators, and their coach got fired at the end of the year. And then they hired this college coach that loves Kyler Murray. So there's been a lot of fluidity in Josh Rosen's life. So I think he deserves the benefit of the doubt in his case to get a chance to prove everybody wrong. And I talked on ESPN NFL Live this week about exactly what Josh Rosen's opportunity is here. The Dolphins haven't had a quarterback to really answer their bell, so to speak, since Dan Marino left. And it's been 23 years, 20 years since Dan Marino retired, 23 years since their last Pro Bowl quarterback, which was Dan Marino. So this is a market that is thirsting for a quarterback, and Josh Rosen has an opportunity to potentially be that guy. So I think he deserves every chance to be it. I'm gonna come with an open mind and say, hey, this guy turns out to be something. Then Dolphins GM Chris Greer deserves a lot of praise for getting them for pennies on a dollar. But right now we don't know, and I think you can put away your tank for Tua shirts for now. And I wrote an article about this, about a week ago. There was a lot of talk about, Are they tanking? Are they looking for 22 and 20 no matter what? And I was sort of the voice saying, hey, I don't think they're tanking no matter what. I think that Brian Flores does not believe in that, and I don't expect them to do that. Yeah, they may get a quarterback in 2020, but I didn't see tank no matter what, whereas that was being written some places. And I think the Josh Rosen trade essentially finalizes that, hey, this team wasn't tanking no matter what. They found a quarterback they believe that has a chance to become something, and if he doesn't, you swing again next year. But right now they're taking their swing. Really good value. I think the big interesting thing that I'm curious about, and I wrote about this for a story that's going to come out tomorrow on ESPN.com, is the relationship between Josh Rosen, Chad O'Shea, and Jim Caldwell. It's going to be so huge here if they want to unlock that Josh Rosen potential, because let's be frank, the Dolphins' offensive line is bad as well as the Cardinals was. So, and the supporting staff around Josh Rosen isn't necessarily rosy compared to where he was in Arizona. So he's not coming into a much more talented situation. The main difference between Miami and Arizona is you hope he has coaching staff that is going to be stable and that believes in him and potentially can be somewhere that he can grow. And he has a guy in Jim Caldwell who's coached Peyton Manning, who's got the most out of him, and has been a head coach twice in this league. And you think that, maybe he can unlock Josh Rosen. And then Chad O'Shea, a guy from New England who is really effective getting running backs out of the backfield, getting them involved in the passing game. Josh Rosen is a really good play-action quarterback and a quarterback using the middle of the field. And Chad O'Shea has specialized in seeing some of these offenses specialize in New England with Josh McDaniels running them. So we're not quite sure exactly what Chad O'Shea's offense will look like, but my thought is that it will use a lot of running backs in the middle. It will use a lot of quick strike passes. It will use a lot of play action. It will use tight ends and slot receivers a lot across the middle of the field, trying to get matchup disadvantages against linebackers and safeties. So that's something that will work really effectively for Josh Rosen. And, that relationship is going to be huge. So I'm intrigued to see that. We're going to have all offseason to talk about the Fist Magic versus Chosen Rosen. I love that nickname, by the way. Even though he didn't live up to it in college, Chosen Rosen is a top tier nickname. So that's gives more interest. And for me, I'm being a little selfish. I would rather have interesting. Good, bad, doesn't matter as much as interesting. So Josh Rosen is an interesting storyline. It's a new storyline. And, I'm happy that we get to cover him. So, and I think, I'm going to go ahead and I see your question, Mark. And I'll come back to Josh Rosen a little later. I want to get to some of you guys' questions. I had a couple questions coming in that I want to answer. And then we'll get back to Josh Rosen. So 72 Silky on Twitter wanted to ask me, how do I think Charles Harris will be used in this new defense? And do you see him improving, was the question. The Dolphins sure hope. Man, that was probably the biggest disappointment for draft day for me and for people who probably follow the Dolphins, is that there were no day one or day two pass rushers. So, they only had 2 picks. They used a second round pick for Josh Rosen. They ended up, using that first round pick for Christian Wilkins. They used a third round pick for Michael Dieter. So there was no room. And their first pass rusher per se was Andrew Van Ginkel from Wisconsin, and his best role was maybe a situational pass rusher. Regardless, Charles Harris is coming into 2019 as most likely your top edge rusher, and he has 3 sacks through 2 seasons, and it's not acceptable. So I think that obviously they'll give him his third chance. I don't think that he should look at this situation as anything other than maybe his last chance in Miami to get it right. So I think that he's played some linebacker through some of the offseason workouts, and I think they're going to give him a shot to be maybe a linebacker when they go into a 3-4 zone. I don't think they're going to be entirely a 3-4 team, so he is still going to have put his hand in the ground and rush the passer as a defensive end. But you hope that maybe the multiple scheme that Brian Flores runs and a new coaching staff, and he's supposedly getting healthier. I know he was doing a lot of workouts with a trainer out in this area with his calf that made him miss most of last season. So he supposedly he's a hard worker from what we hear. He just didn't have that explosiveness or that ability to win one-on-one matchups last season or really the last 2 years. So maybe he gets with somebody like a Terrell Williams, who's the Dolphins defensive coordinator. Maybe he gets some hand-on-hand one-on-one time with Brian Flores, who was the linebackers coach for most of this year, and maybe he can unlock a lot of Charles Harris. The Dolphins would love it because they don't have any pass rush anywhere. So if Charles Harris ends up recovering, so to speak, and becoming, not even a great player, not even a good player, just a steady player, that would be a win for Miami. So I do see him improving. The question is how much. He had 3 sacks over the last 2 years, so improvement would be 3 sacks this year. But obviously, Dolphins fans and Dolphins would love to see that number, 5 or 6 or 7 sacks this year. We'll see. I think they're going to end up adding another edge rusher. There's a guy like a Ziggy Ansah that's still out there. Maybe you look into a Shane Ray. If you're doing some of the 3-4 scheme, I think they need to add another veteran. And maybe after May 8th, when compensatory picks are done, they make that move. But right now there's a lot of pressure and a lot of counting on Charles Harris to be something he hasn't. So improvement, yes, but I wouldn't go ahead and buy your Charles Harris jerseys yet. I think I've got to believe it when I see it with him, and I'm hoping to see it this training camp. Mark James has a question. Seeing how Miami didn't pick up a tackle, do you see Davis moving to right tackle? That's a good question. I would love to keep Jesse Davis at guard because I think that's where he is better. Right tackle obviously is the biggest need and the hardest position to fill after they lost Juwan James. There's no capable right tackles that I would trust on this roster. Isaiah Prince, their 6th-round pick, is a developmental guy. He should be nowhere near the starting lineup this year unless something surprising happens. Zach Stirrup is a swing tackle at best. So there's no real answer at right tackle. So if all worst comes to worst and you don't have anybody else there, I could see him getting swing out there. But I think the most likely option is they sign somebody after May 8th that doesn't count against their comp pick formula. There's a guy like a Ryan Schrader that's out there. Jeremy Parnell is out there. Jordan Mills is out there. There's a few right tackle options who, none of these guys are going to be world beaters. They're not going to save the ship. You're still going to have issues with them, but they're guys that you probably can fill in at starting right tackle and feel okay about, at least until you fill that role more significantly. So I think that that's probably the route that the Dolphins go, and they keep Jesse Davis at right guard, and then you try to start Michael Dieter at left guard from week 1. So that would be my early guess at how the offensive line breaks out. You look at Laramie Tunsil, the stud, their top player on offense at left tackle, left guard, Michael Dieter, who's a rookie. I think he can win that job out of camp over Chris Reed. Center is Daniel Kilgore coming off that season-ending surgery last year. He comes back healthy and starts there. Right guard, Jesse Davis, and then right tackle, like I said, a street free agent like a Ryan Schrader or a Jordan Mills. And it's not that wouldn't be a great offensive line by any stretch, but it'd be a manageable offensive line. Probably wouldn't be the league's worst offensive line, and something that you can get by with, whether it's Josh Rosen or Ryan Fitzpatrick back there under center. So hope that's a long-winded way to answer your question, Mark, about right tackle. Hey, LT, how you doing? I think next, and like I said, always, guys, if you guys have more questions, fire away on the chat. I want to talk a little bit bigger picture of the NFL. My favorite 3 drafts that I saw this weekend was I love what Washington did. They've got a lot of criticism, and much of it was deserved, but getting a guy like Dwayne Haskins at 15 falling in their lap, and then still getting Montez Sweat at 26, a guy who, I know he had some questions about medical and his heart. He had some questions about, what type of person he is, but I think that he was one of the top 5 edge rushers in this class. As you guys know, I love Cleveland Ferrell, but I think that Montez Sweat would have been another option for the Dolphins at 13 that I would have been fine for if he went there. So I think the Washington getting, those 2 first-round picks was big. I love what Buffalo did. The rival, Ed Oliver, was my favorite player in this draft. I thought that he's a top 5 player in this draft. I wouldn't be surprised if he's the best player in this draft 5 years from now. I think he can be that good. Buffalo got him at 9. He fell in their lap. And I think that he's going to be a guy who creates a lot of havoc in the AFC East for a very long time. And then they bookend that with Cody Ford out of Oklahoma, who I think is going to be a really good right tackle in the second round. I thought he would have been a first-round pick. He ended up being a second-round pick, a big physical guy. He's going to fit in that Buffalo culture. And you get two starters, 2 guys who I think can be, 10-year starters for you in the first and second round. So I love what Buffalo was able to do in that department. And I actually really love what Philadelphia did. Trading up a few picks to get Andre Dillard at left tackle, a guy who could eventually be their long-term answer at left tackle, replacing Jason Peters. He doesn't contribute, necessarily this year, but I think he could be a long-term left tackle. And if you can have that left tackle position filled by Jason Peters and Andre Dillard for 2 decades, that's a win. You can keep Lane Johnson on the right side. Miles Sanders, they got in the second round, and I think he's a guy who, they drafted LaShawn McCoy about 10 years ago in the second round, and your hope is that he becomes that type player. And, maybe that's lofty expectations that you could have on a guy, but, he showed a lot in his year in Penn State, and he was probably my favorite running back in this draft, and they got him late in the second round. So I think he could be a day 1 starter, and maybe he becomes, a running back, in that rookie of the year conversation. So that's my thoughts there. And then they drafted the wide receiver, I think, in J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, who wasn't on a lot of people's radar as far as, a first or second round pick, but he's a guy who compares himself to Alshon Jeffrey. He looks up to Alshon Jeffrey, and he goes where Alshon Jeffrey is. So maybe that's a cut to watch out from, a cut or a trade a year or 2 from now, and maybe there's an easy transition that they get a guy they could put in there and be their wide receiver, their big wide receiver for years to come. So I love those 3 drafts. And there's quite a few other ones. I love what Miami did with Josh Rosen. I didn't love Josh Rosen, but the value they did, not waiting and putting your hands all into the 2020 pot. I like them taking a chance in that aspect, so I think that was a good move. I love the Patriots, and they always seem to get these picks. Chase Winovich was one of my favorite players in this draft. I thought that a lot of times on tape he looked better than Rashawn Gary, and the Patriots got Chase Winovich in the 3rd round, and the Packers got Rashawn Gary 12th overall. That's a major win for New England, in my opinion. So that's a little bit of my draft thoughts. I'm going to, I think I had one more question that I had from Twitter that I want to go ahead and answer, and then I will talk about the AFC East and what I see in the big picture overall, and answer any remaining questions, and then I'll get out of here. It's a beautiful Friday out here in Miami, so I got to figure out how to be by some water at some point this weekend. So that's definitely a goal for me. The last question I had was, I think this is from John Miller. He asked me, what do you think happens with Josh Rosen this season? Is he the Dolphins' answer at quarterback? The $1 million question, and I waited until 20 minutes into the session to talk about this, but this will be a good question, and I love you guys' thoughts on it if you want to hear it. But I love Josh Rosen's thought of this as a 1-year tryout, because that's essentially what they're at. And I think that best case scenario for Miami is that this is a Jared Goff situation. You have a really talented quarterback that was put in a really bad system in Arizona last year with coaches that didn't maximize him. He didn't have much stability. The offensive line was in the tank. A lot of these issues, and you bring in a new coaching staff, you bring in a new support system, and all of a sudden you get current Jared Goff out of Josh Rosen. That's your hope, and if that becomes the case, then Chris Greer ended up getting the franchise quarterback with a late second-round pick, and that's a steal. The worst-case scenario, And this is what I'm fearful of, and this is why I'm not in love with the trade as much as I like the trade. What happens if Josh Rosen shows you he's solid enough, where you still see the potential, you still see the long-term growth. You think, okay, he made progress. He's better than he was last year. We could mold him into this, and you pass on a quarterback in 2020, and you give him a chance, and he keeps making improvements, and then he turns into Ryan Tannehill, where he's good enough to say keep the job, to be the starter, but not good enough to give you that franchise quarterback you desperately need. And I think that's probably the fear here of indecision. What if you don't know by the end of the year whether Josh Rosen's your answer at quarterback? And I know everybody thinks it's always clear, like you'll either know or you don't. You're going to watch the practice. You're going to watch the games. Sometimes it's not simple. I talked to Dolphins coaches that were on last year's staff that said their biggest issue is they still didn't have a true evaluation of Ryan Tannehill after 7 years. If it took them 7 years to properly evaluate Ryan Tannehill, and they still didn't get an answer, how are they going to evaluate this new staff, Josh Rosen, in one? So that's the challenge here, evaluating Josh Rosen in a year and deciding whether he is your future or if you should go to a different direction. My hope, because it'd be interesting, is that he comes out and balls out this year. I don't care if they go 6-9, 6-10, 7-9, and everybody's like, "Oh, you ruined the draft pick." If you see considerable progress from Josh Rosen, enough to show that he's a starting quarterback, you've got to step up on the rebuild. You come in there and you fill out the rest of your offensive line next year's draft. You fill out some pass rushers in next year's draft and free agency, and all of a sudden you get a cornerback. You pay Xavier Howard. You pay Laramie Tunsil, and all of a sudden you got a roster that's ready to compete for the playoffs. Right now, you're probably 8 to 10 pieces away from that area. If Josh Rosen becomes one of those pieces, if one of the rookies you drafted become one of those pieces, Wilkins probably becomes one of those pieces, you go into next offseason, and maybe you only have to fill 5 or 6 of those spots. And, you have 10 or 12 draft picks, and you have over $100 million. And now it's a lot easier to fill 5 or 6 spots. And now all of a sudden, maybe in 2020, instead of 2021, which was the thought, you're ready to, maybe be 8-8, 9-17, compete for a wild card spot. And then 2021, with Josh Rosen under the helm, still on that great contract where you're paying him $2 million a year, you're able to say, okay, maybe Tom Brady's retired by that point, and maybe you can compete with whoever that next era AFC East team is for the crown. So that's the best case scenario, and that's what you're looking for the Dolphins. Somewhere in the middle as he ends up flaming out and they draft a quarterback in 2020 and Tua. So I don't know which way it's going to go. Like I said, I'd love for Josh Rosen to end up being the guy here. But I don't want the Dolphins to get caught in indecision and mediocrity like they have, over the better part of these decades. So that's my thought on the Josh Rosen trade. I want him to prove it. I want to give him every chance to show what he's got. And I'm intrigued about how he looks this summer under Chad O'Shea and Jim Caldwell. So if you guys don't have any more questions, I think that's it for me today. I know it was a slow Friday and in May, so we didn't have as much conversation as we usually do. But we'll do these a little sporadically throughout the off season. Maybe we'll do one as they wrap up workouts in June, and maybe we'll do one before training camp starts. So we'll come back with the next season, season 3 next year. As always, if you guys have any feedback that you have on the show, what you like to see, whether it's a day, whether it's a time, whether it's a type of content, I'm all ears. Definitely want to make this better and bigger as we go into year 3, our second here in Miami. So thank you guys as always for tuning in to these chats, and hope y'all enjoy your Friday. Until next time.